There I was, standing on my beloved front porch with a steaming cup of coffee, watching the sunrise paint the neighborhood in golden hues. The weathered wooden boards beneath my feet had stories to tell, generations of happy memories etched into every grain. Then I heard it, the unmistakable click-clack of designer heels marching up my walkway with military precision. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness that could curdle milk. "I'm Karen from the HOA board, and this," she thrust a clipboard toward me like a weapon, "is your official notice of non-compliance." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. Non-compliance? For what? She adjusted her cat-eye glasses, the kind that screamed, "I need to speak to your manager," even when there was no manager to speak to. "Your porch," she said, gesturing with manicured fingers at the wraparound structure that had stood proudly for over 60 years. "It violates our community aesthetic standards. It has to go." Little did she know that her power trip was about to spark the most epic neighborhood battle in HOA history. Because sometimes, when someone tells you to tear down your heritage, the only logical response is to build something even more outrageous. And that's exactly what I did. Welcome to the story of how one Karen's crusade against my front porch led me to transform my humble home into the only legally recognized medieval castle in suburban America. Let me back up a bit. 6 months earlier, when I first drove through Willow Creek Estates, I thought I'd found paradise. Tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, and that small-town charm you usually only see in movies. The real estate agent had gushed about the close-knit community and high standards that made this neighborhood so desirable. What caught my eye, though, was a beautiful old farmhouse on the corner of Maple and 3rd. Unlike its cookie-cutter neighbors, this home had character. Built in 1947, it stood as a testament to craftsmanship from another era. The wraparound porch, with its hand-carved railings and sturdy cedar posts, had been lovingly maintained by 3 generations of the Henderson family. When old Mrs. Henderson decided to move to Florida to be closer to her grandchildren, I jumped at the chance to buy it. The closing went smoothly, and I spent my first week just sitting on that porch, imagining all the stories it could tell. The first hint of trouble came during my second week. A welcome basket appeared on my doorstep, accompanied by a 47-page HOA rulebook. I flipped through it casually, noting regulations about grass height, approved paint colors, and holiday decoration timeframes. Standard stuff, I thought. Nothing that seemed relevant to my situation. Then came the neighbors. Most were friendly enough, but a few made odd comments. "Brave choice, buying the Henderson place," said Tom from across the street. "Lot of history there. Hope you're ready for it." I laughed it off, thinking he meant the maintenance that comes with an older home. If only I'd known what he really meant. 3 months passed peacefully. I settled into a routine, made friends with some neighbors, and even attended a few community events. That's where I first noticed Karen, though I didn't know her name then. She was always at the center of every gathering, clipboard in hand, making notes about whose hedges needed trimming or whose mailbox wasn't regulation height. The morning of the confrontation started like any other. Birds chirping, newspaper delivery, the familiar creak of my rocking chair. Then Karen arrived with her decree that my porch violated community standards. The HOA architectural guidelines clearly state that all external structures must conform to the established neighborhood aesthetic, she recited, as if reading from a script. "Your porch is too large, too old-fashioned, and frankly, it's bringing down property values." I set my coffee down slowly, my mind racing. This porch has been here since 1947. It's older than the HOA itself. Karen's smile never wavered. "Irrelevant. You have 30 days to submit plans for removal or modification to bring it into compliance. Failure to do so will result in daily fines of $100. As she click-clacked away, leaving me with the official notice, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about a porch anymore. This was about preserving history, standing up to bureaucratic overreach, and not letting one person's power trip destroy something beautiful. That afternoon, I did what any reasonable person would do in my situation. I started researching. First stop was the county records office, where I discovered something interesting. My property had been designated as a historic structure of significance in 1992, a full 5 years before the HOA was established. Next, I visited the law offices of Anderson and Mitchell, specialists in property law. Sarah Mitchell, a sharp-eyed attorney with a reputation for taking on HOAs, listened to my story with growing interest. "You might have something here," she said, pulling out a thick binder of HOA bylaws. "Let's look at their pre-existing structure clause." We spent hours poring over documents, cross-referencing county records with HOA regulations. That's when we found it. Buried in subsection 14.3.2 was a provision that exempted structures of historical significance predating the establishment of the homeowners association from certain architectural requirements. "But here's the catch," Sarah warned. "They can still require you to maintain aesthetic compatibility with the neighborhood. It's a gray area they'll try to exploit." I went home that evening with a plan forming in my mind. If they wanted aesthetic compatibility, I'd give them aesthetic compatibility. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was up against. The next HOA meeting was enlightening. Karen presided like a queen holding court, flanked by 2 other board members who nodded at her every word. When the floor opened for resident concerns, I raised my hand. "I'd like to discuss the notice I received about my porch," I began. Karen's eyes lit up with predatory glee. "Ah, yes, the Henderson property. As I explained, your porch is non-compliant and must be modified or removed." "But it's a historic structure," I countered, "protected under county ordinance." "The HOA supersedes county ordinances in matters of community aesthetics," she declared, a statement that Sarah had already warned me was— "This is ridiculous," Karen sputtered. "You can't turn your house into a castle." "Actually," Sarah Mitchell stood up from the back of the room, "he can. The HOA bylaws specifically allow for historically inspired renovations, and the county has already approved the plans as consistent with the area's documented architectural heritage." The next few months were a whirlwind of construction, legal battles, and neighborhood drama. Contractors worked around the clock to transform my simple porch into something out of a fairy tale. The original structure was carefully preserved and reinforced, then hidden beneath historically accurate stonework. The turrets rose slowly but surely, each one topped with a conical roof that matched the specifications from the 1910 plans. Karen fought us every step of the way. She filed complaints with the building department, all dismissed, organized protests, poorly attended, and even tried to change the HOA bylaws retroactively, legally impossible. But for every obstacle she threw up, we had a counter. Sarah had done her homework, and our case was airtight. The day the drawbridge was installed was particularly memorable. It was a Saturday morning, and half the neighborhood turned out to watch. Tom brought donuts. Mrs. Chen served tea. Even some of Karen's supporters couldn't help but watch in fascination as the massive wooden bridge was lowered into place. "It actually works," someone exclaimed as I demonstrated the pulley system. The drawbridge was more than just a novelty. It was a symbol. When raised, it sent a clear message. This was my castle, and Karen's authority stopped at my moat, which was actually just a decorative water feature, but still. As construction neared completion, something unexpected happened. Property values in our neighborhood started to rise. Real estate agents began bringing clients specifically to see the castle house. Local news did a feature on our unique blend of suburban living and medieval architecture. What Karen had claimed would destroy the neighborhood was actually making it more desirable. The final showdown came at the annual HOA meeting. Karen had prepared a presentation titled "The Negative Impact of Non-Conforming Architecture on Community Standards." She had charts, graphs, and even a PowerPoint slideshow. But when she clicked to her first slide, the room erupted in laughter. There, on the screen, was a photo of my castle porch that she had intended to use as evidence of its inappropriateness. Instead, it looked magnificent. The morning sun glinted off the stone facade, the turrets stood proud against the sky, and the lowered drawbridge welcomed visitors with old-world charm. "As you can see," Karen began, but she was drowned out by applause. One by one, neighbors stood up to speak. They talked about how my stand against arbitrary rules had inspired them. They shared their own stories of HOA overreach. They presented a petition signed by 80% of residents demanding reform of the architectural guidelines. By the end of the meeting, Karen had resigned from the board. The remaining members voted unanimously to revise the bylaws, creating more flexibility for homeowners while still maintaining reasonable standards. 6 months after that fateful morning, when Karen first appeared on my porch, I found myself once again enjoying my morning coffee. But now, I sat beneath a Gothic archway, looking out over my drawbridge at a neighborhood that had learned to embrace rather than suppress individuality. The castle porch had become something of a local landmark. Children begged their parents to drive by the castle house on their way to school. Couples took wedding photos in front of it. The Historical Society even added it to their annual home tour. As for Karen, she moved to a gated community 3 towns over, one with even stricter HOA rules. I heard she's already the vice president of their board. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd just given in and removed my original porch. But then I look at the community we've built, the friendships forged in the fire of our shared struggle, and I know I made the right choice. The moral of the story isn't just about fighting arbitrary rules or standing up to bullies in positions of power. It's about the importance of community being based on mutual respect rather than enforced conformity. It's about preserving history while still allowing for creativity and growth. And yes, it's about the satisfaction of beating someone at their own game by taking their rules to their logical, if slightly absurd, conclusion. These days, when new neighbors move in, they get a different kind of welcome basket. Along with the usual HOA rulebook, there's a small scroll. Unroll it, and you'll find a simple message. Welcome to Willow Creek Estates, where every home has the right to be a castle. Every morning, as I lower my drawbridge to get the newspaper, I'm reminded that sometimes the best way to change a system isn't to fight it head-on, but to embrace it so completely that everyone can see how ridiculous it was in the first place. And if that means living in a castle, well, I've always believed that every person's home should be their castle. Mine just happens to look the part.